There are some lives that shimmer so brightly on screen that we forget the shadows that shaped them, and Goldie Hawn has spent more than 6 decades teaching the world how to smile. For millions, she is the woman whose laughter felt like sunlight, whose joy felt effortless, whose presence made entire rooms lift. But behind that soft glow was a child who learned far too early that the world could break your heart before you ever understood what a heart truly was. And it is in that quiet truth, the one she rarely shared, where her real story begins. By the time she became a household name, audiences believed they knew her, yet the woman behind the golden hair and sparkling voice was fighting private battles she carried in silence. Heartache shaped her just as much as success, and the tragedy she later revealed would shift everything we thought we understood about her path. Today, at 79, the true depth of what she endured finally comes into focus. This is not just the story of a Hollywood legend. It is the story of a woman who survived what should have broken her and rose with grace anyway. There is a tenderness to the beginning of every life, but in Goldie Hawn's story, that tenderness felt almost fragile, as though joy and heartbreak were learning to live side by side before she ever understood their names. Born in Washington, D.C. in 1945, she arrived in a world still catching its breath after a brutal war, a world hungry for lightness, and somehow, from her earliest years, she seemed determined to carry that light wherever she went, even when she did not always feel it inside herself. Her parents noticed her quiet sensitivity long before the rest of the world knew her smile. She was a shy child, thoughtful, observant, often retreating into the corner of a room not out of fear, but from an almost instinctive emotional depth that set her apart. But when she moved, something inside her awakened. At age 3, she began ballet training, slipping into tiny satin shoes that barely made a sound on the studio floor. Dance gave her a language before she learned words for her feelings. It offered rhythm where her anxiety once lived, beauty where her uncertainty had settled, and for a little girl trying to understand a big world, it became the place where she could breathe. By her teenage years, she was performing in ballet productions, teaching classes, and pouring every piece of her heart into choreography that felt more like confession than craft. Dance wasn't just talent for her, it was refuge. As she moved into young adulthood, stages became her second home. She took roles in local productions, balancing the discipline of the studio with the raw openness of theater. With every performance, she revealed just enough of herself to connect, yet held enough back to protect the private storms she could never quite still. Her smile, already bright and infectious, became the warmest part of her on-stage presence. Nobody knew how much effort it took to wear it off stage too. Her journey forward was shaped by hard work, chance, and an almost otherworldly charm. That charm carried her all the way to the late 1960s when she landed a spot on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, a show that would change her life and her legacy forever. It was supposed to be just another job, another chance to dance and entertain, but the moment she appeared on screen, the world seemed to stop and watch. They saw her giggling between sketches, painting joy across every frame, as though she had been born to lift spirits. Her laughter was airy, musical, irresistible. Her persona felt so effortless that audiences believed they were witnessing her truest self. They had no idea what it cost her. Behind the bright eyes and sunlit innocence lived a young woman carrying more fear than she ever let the cameras see. She struggled with anxiety and insecurity, sometimes so intense it hollowed her from the inside. But she kept moving, kept smiling, kept offering the world the version of herself she thought it needed. The audience adored her. They felt healed by her humor, comforted by her glow. But while the world was falling in love with the girl who laughed her way through each episode, Goldie was still trying to understand why laughter felt easier to perform than to feel. That contrast became the quiet thread woven through her early life, the tension between public joy and private ache. She was rising, blooming, becoming famous at a pace that stunned even her, yet still carrying the same fragile heart that once trembled backstage in Washington, D.C. She had no idea then how far this path would take her, or how deeply the world would misunderstand her. All she knew was that she had been given a spotlight, and she would step into it with a smile, even if her own light flickered in the shadows where nobody looked. The world watched Goldie Hawn rise with extraordinary speed, as if her laughter had lifted her straight into the sky. By the end of the 1960s, she had become a household name, but it was 1969 that sealed her place in Hollywood history. Her performance in Cactus Flower earned her an Academy Award, a moment that should have felt like triumph, celebration, validation. She stood there on that glittering night with the statue in her hands, smiling the smile the world expected, yet inside she felt an unsettling mixture of pride, disbelief, and a quiet ache she could not quite name. The applause washed over her, but so did the weight of what it meant to be America's funny girl, a title that brought adoration on one side and a heavy silence on the other. As the 70s and 80s unfolded, she became one of Hollywood's most beloved comedic forces. Audiences adored her sparkle, her timing, her effortless ability to lift a scene. Films like Shampoo, Private Benjamin, and Overboard cemented her as a star who could make laughter feel like medicine. She brought joy to millions. Yet behind those brilliant performances lived a woman who often felt stretched thin, caught between the spotlight she worked so hard to earn and the emotional stillness she longed for in private. Fame gave her opportunity, stability, and a platform she had never imagined as a young dancer in Washington, D.C. But it also carved away at her time, her energy, and the fragile spaces where she once found her sense of self. Her personal life reflected this delicate balance. In 1969, the same year she won her Academy Award, she married dancer Gus Triconis. For a while the partnership felt familiar, rooted in the shared language of performance and hard work. But as her career grew, the distance between them widened. They separated in 1976, a quiet end to a relationship overshadowed by the momentum of her rising fame. That same year she married musician Bill Hudson, hoping perhaps that love could offer the grounding her fast-moving world could not. Becoming a mother brought her a different kind of purpose. Kate and Oliver Hudson were her heart, her anchor, the gentle reminder that life needed tenderness as much as it needed accomplishment. Yet raising children in Hollywood, under the aching glare of scrutiny and the unpredictability of her schedule, became another source of emotional weight. She was balancing demanding film sets, public appearances, and the responsibilities of parenthood, all while trying to protect her children from the chaos that fame could so easily invite. Her marriage to Bill Hudson unraveled under the strain, leading to their divorce in 1982, a painful chapter that unfolded under the watchful eyes of the press. The public saw the humor, the charm, the golden glow, but they rarely saw the exhaustion that followed her home at night. They did not see her holding herself together between interviews, or the loneliness that crept in when laughter became performance instead of joy. Being known for comedy meant she was constantly expected to be light, cheerful, and carefree, even on days when her heart felt unbearably heavy. The world celebrated her smile, yet few understood how hard she worked to keep it alive. There was a quiet clash between her inner world and the image projected onto screens across the globe. Fame opened doors, but each door came with pressure. Opportunity brought success, but success demanded more of her than she ever anticipated. She was living a dream by all public measures, yet sometimes felt like she was drifting inside it, searching for a grounding she could not quite reach. Still, through triumphs and heartbreaks, she kept moving forward, guided by the same resilience that had carried her through childhood. Goldie was learning, often painfully, that being loved by the world did not always protect the heart that belonged only to her. By the time Goldie Hawn entered the 1980s, she had lived enough joy, heartbreak, triumph, and exhaustion to fill several lifetimes. Yet fate, in its quiet, unhurried way, brought her back to someone she had met long before she fully understood the shape of her own heart. She first crossed paths with Kurt Russell in 1966, when they were both young performers trying to carve their places in Hollywood. At the time, they were simply two rising talents, each stepping toward their futures without any idea that those futures would one day intertwine so deeply. Their connection then was friendly, fleeting, the kind of acquaintance that passes through a life without leaving a mark, only to return years later with profound meaning. It was in 1983, during the filming of Swing Shift, that something shifted between them. This time they recognized in each other a gentleness, a steadiness, and a shared desire for authenticity that fame had often complicated. Their relationship grew not from spectacle or publicity, but from quiet conversations, mutual respect, and a tenderness neither had expected to find at that point in their lives. Goldie, still healing from the emotional turbulence of the previous decade, found in Kurt a partner who did not try to mold her into an image or expectation. He simply allowed her to be, and in that permission she found peace. They chose not to marry, a decision that puzzled the public but grounded their love. For Goldie and Kurt, commitment was not measured by ceremony or legality, but by presence, trust, and daily devotion. They believed that choosing each other freely, without obligation or societal pressure, made their bond stronger. And history seemed to prove them right, for their partnership became one of Hollywood's most enduring, a quiet testament to a love that grew patiently over decades. Together they blended their families with care and intention, raising Kate and Oliver Hudson alongside Kurt's son Boston, and welcoming their son Wyatt in 1986. They built a home rooted in stability and warmth. Goldie approached motherhood with the same tenderness that had shaped her since childhood, determined to give her children the emotional grounding she had fought so hard to protect within herself. Their household was full of laughter, structure, and open-hearted communication, a refuge from the ever-turning machinery of Hollywood. As her family flourished, Goldie also leaned deeper into her lifelong commitment to emotional and spiritual well-being. She had always been reflective, sensitive to the world in ways that others sometimes mistook for fragility. Over time, she realized that the ache she carried, the lingering shadows of anxiety and inner doubt, were not weaknesses but invitations to understand herself more fully. In 2003, she co-founded the Hawn Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting children's mental health and social-emotional learning. It was her way of transforming her own struggles into something healing for others, a promise to use her voice for those who did not yet know how to name their pain. Yet even within a loving partnership and meaningful work, Goldie was not untouched by the quiet challenges that still appeared like echoes from earlier years. Sensitivity does not disappear with age, nor does the emotional complexity of a life spent in the public eye. There were days when her heart felt heavy without warning, when the weight of old wounds resurfaced, reminding her that even the most devoted love cannot erase every trace of what came before. Kurt stood beside her through those moments, not trying to fix them, but offering the same steady presence that had first drawn her to him. Their love became less about perfection, and more about endurance, tenderness, and the courage to remain open even after years of heartbreak. Goldie and Kurt built a life that honored both their joys and their vulnerabilities, showing the world that true partnership is not the absence of struggle, but the willingness to face it together. There is a certain glow the world has always associated with Goldie Hawn, a brightness that seemed to shimmer effortlessly through every frame of film and every public appearance. Yet behind that luminous presence lived a truth far heavier, a truth she carried with her long before the world ever knew her name. Goldie's history with anxiety and depression did not begin in the glare of Hollywood lights, but in childhood, when fear and sadness would rise inside her with no clear reason, overwhelming her small heart before she even understood what those feelings meant. She grew into adolescence already knowing the weight of emotional storms. already learning how to tuck them away behind smiles that felt safer than honesty. As her fame grew, so did the intensity of her inner battles. The late 60s and 70s brought success that few could dream of, but with it came a pressure that pushed against every fragile corner of her mind. During the height of her career, when audiences saw only joy, charm, and comedic brilliance, Goldie privately endured panic attacks that would leave her trembling, breathless, and uncertain of how to exist within the expectations placed upon her. She later revealed publicly that these moments were so severe they made her question everything she had worked for, wondering how she could continue living a life the world celebrated while fighting emotions that threatened to undo her from within. The contrast between her public image and her private reality was stark. Hollywood embraced her as a symbol of happiness, a woman who could make an entire nation laugh with a single expression. But laughter, even when it is genuine, cannot always silence the ache beneath it. Goldie felt the emotional exhaustion of being everyone's source of light while struggling to keep her own inner world from dimming. Fame brought opportunity, but it also magnified her fears, amplifying her sense of responsibility to remain the cheerful figure people expected. Every interview, every appearance, became another moment where she hid her trembling hands and practiced her brightness like a craft. By the early 2000s, the weight of it all grew impossible to ignore. After decades of working relentlessly and navigating emotional battles that never fully eased, Goldie made the life-altering decision to step away from Hollywood. It was not an act of retreat, but of survival. She chose her mental health, her peace, and her family over the constant demands of an industry that rarely pauses long enough to consider the human being behind the performance. Stepping back allowed her to breathe again, to rebuild herself quietly, without cameras waiting to capture her cracks. Through these years, her dedication to raising her children remained unwavering. Kate and Oliver Hudson grew up with a mother who loved fiercely, even on the days when her emotional storms made it difficult to stand steady. She protected them from the depths of her suffering, shielding them from the darker moments that the public never saw. Her love was constant, even when her strength felt fragile, and her children would one day speak openly about the depth of compassion and resilience she embodied. In the silence that followed her retreat from Hollywood, Goldie sought healing in ways that felt gentle and grounding. Mindfulness became a lifeline. Meditation offered a place to settle the chaos within. Her philanthropic work through the Hawn Foundation, especially its MindUP program supporting children's emotional well-being, reflected her deep desire to transform her own pain into something meaningful for others. She understood what it meant to feel overwhelmed, to feel unseen, and she wanted to ensure that young people had the tools she had once needed so desperately. Still, healing did not erase the truth. Goldie's struggles remained a part of her, woven into the fabric of her life. Her smile, though real, carried years of hidden battles, a reminder that even the brightest souls can hold the heaviest burdens. In speaking her truth, she revealed the quiet resilience that defined her far more than fame ever could. At 79, Goldie Hawn carries herself with the same warmth that once lit up television screens and movie theaters, but time has softened her glow into something quieter, something touched by reflection. Aging has brought wisdom, gratitude, and moments of profound peace, yet it has also brought her face to face with the truths that still ache, the fractures that never fully healed. Of all the challenges she has weathered, the one that weighs heaviest is not her own loneliness, nor the emotional battles she fought privately for decades, but the lingering wounds within her family, wounds she has spent years trying to mend, yet still feels pressing against her heart. The estrangement between her ex-husband Bill Hudson and their children, Kate and Oliver, remains one of the deepest sources of sorrow in her life. It is a pain layered not only in history, but in years of public tension and unspoken grief. Bill and Goldie married in 1976 and divorced in 1982, a separation that unfolded under the scrutiny of fame. What might have been a private heartbreak for two people became a narrative shaped by headlines, assumptions, and the unavoidable ripple effect that touched the children they loved. As the years passed, the distance between Bill and the children grew wider, and the emotional strain surrounding that separation continued to echo long after the marriage ended. For Goldie, the most devastating part of this painful chapter was watching Kate and Oliver navigate the rejection and disappointment that shaped their early years, their longing for a father's presence, and the confusion that came with his absence, carved memories she wishes she could rewrite. Even decades later, the sorrow lingers. She has spoken about the heartbreak of witnessing her children carry that hurt into adulthood, a hurt that fame only magnified. Every interview, every rumor, every public comment stretched the wound further, turning a private fracture into something the world felt entitled to watch. The pain deepened when Bill publicly blamed her for the distance that grew between him and the children. His words, sharp and painful, landed heavily on a heart already carrying more than the world ever knew. Goldie, who devoted her life to nurturing her family, to creating stability through love and consistency, felt the sting of accusations she could never counter without bringing more turmoil to the surface. She chose silence, hoping that restraint might protect her children from further damage. Yet the emotional weight remained, resting quietly in the spaces no one else could see. Now, as she reflects on nearly 8 decades of life, Goldie acknowledges that this fracture, above all others, is the one that still breaks her heart. She fears the passage of time not for herself, but for what it means for the relationships she still hopes to see healed. She understands that years bring opportunities for forgiveness, but they also move quickly, leaving her wondering whether there is enough time left to mend every wound, to lift her children out of the pain they carried for so long. A mother's love is fierce, but even love has its limits when weighed against history. Goldie has always believed that joy and tragedy walk side by side, that the brightest moments of life often exist alongside shadows that never fully fade. Her laughter, the very thing that made her beloved across generations, has always coexisted with grief. Her radiant spirit has learned to live with both truths at once. At 79, she carries pride for the life she built, gratitude for the love she found with Kurt Russell, and awe for the resilience of her children. Yet beneath all of that lies the quiet sorrow of a mother who wishes she could have spared her family from the heartbreak that followed them for decades. This, she admits softly, is the tragedy that still lingers, knowing that even a life filled with love, success, and deep spiritual understanding cannot erase the emotional wounds that shaped the people she cherishes most. It is the weight she continues to carry with tenderness, with hope, and with the unbreakable conviction that healing, however late, is still possible. In the quiet twilight of her life, Goldie Hawn stands as a woman shaped by equal parts wonder and ache, a soul who learned again and again that joy is not the absence of sorrow but the courage to keep choosing light even when shadows follow close behind. She built a life filled with laughter that reached millions, yet she never stopped tending to the fragile places inside herself, the ones formed in childhood and tested by fame, family fractures, and the relentless expectations of a watching world. What makes her story so deeply human is not her success, nor her iconic smile. It's the honesty she brings to the truth that healing is not something we finish, it's something we return to, tenderly, over and over. At 79, she still reaches for peace, still hopes for time, still believes in love's ability to soften old wounds. And maybe that's why her final reflections feel so powerful, because they remind us that behind every bright life is a beating, breakable heart, doing its best. For more emotional stories, check out this video.